There have been several moments like this during the course of this year that have brought us together as an American family, whether it was the tragedy in Tucson or most recently our unified response to the terrible storms that have taken place in the South. It is my fervent hope that we can harness some of that unity.
That's a nice thought. What does this all mean, this call to unity? Because with the Obamas, nothing is as it seems. When we call for unity, it seems at first blush to be a wonderful thing. Well, who doesn't want to be unified? Well, you have to be unified in your love of country. I would certainly hope so. We should definitely be unified in celebrating the death of a tyrant who was responsible for murdering almost 3,000 Americans. In addition to the USS Cole and the embassy bombings in Africa and everything else he would have planned and executed if he could have. Well, sure, unity in that, no doubt about it. The president is right to call for that. But when we hear the calls for unity today, in the aftermath of all of this, I don't think it's just about being unified around the good feelings about the death of bin Laden or the support for our Navy SEALs and for the military and for the first responders on 9/11. We also remember them today, as we should every day. The unity that is being called for in the aftermath of these heroic acts and wonderful execution by this president, you have to say that he made the right call on this. Thank goodness it worked out. But he made the right call. And to get to watch that thing unfold in the Situation Room, how much would you have paid to see that? Oh. Unity in the face of a debt ceiling vote that now Timmy Geithner is going to push off to August 2nd. I thought the sky was going to fall if we didn't pass the debt ceiling hike this week or next week. I thought it was all going to fall. Now it's August 2nd that it's going to fall. You see how the narrative keeps changing? Well, it just seems like we can move this on. We've been looking at the papers, and it looks like we can move it to August 2nd now, because I can move around some numbers, and so now that we can push it off to August 2nd. Okay, let's be unified until then. All right. So, is unity about how we cut spending? Is unity about how we proceed in the Middle East, in Libya, and beyond? Are we to be unified about the health care reform law that is still wildly unpopular and that will undoubtedly destroy the best health care system in the United States?
We can harness some of that unity.
The health care reform bill in and of itself that became law destroyed any chance of true unity in fashioning the reform that is necessary for the way we receive health care services and the way the whole system works. Who is responsible for shattering unity? Well, to listen to the Democrats after Tucson, the last time we heard the big call for unity, well, let's just review, shall we?
This is the functional equivalent of bombing innocent civilians.
You are allowed to have an abortion. However, you have to keep a receipt. Did you know that? It's sort of like an old German Nazi movement. Show me your papers.
This Republican path to poverty passes like a tornado through America's nursing homes. This plan would literally be a death trap
for seniors. Death trap, Nazis, tornado through the old folks' homes.
This kind of vilification closes the door to the possibility of compromise.
That's my thought, precisely. So you listen to this program, I hope, to think beyond the headlines and the spin. To think beyond what the experts in the media are telling us about this moment. And to remember what it is we're all supposed to be fighting for day in and day out. Obviously our families, We stand by our faith, our first principles, our country. And that love of country requires that we have a vigorous debate. And that debate requires that we not be unified on certain issues, frankly. Remember when Christ said, I come not to unite? He didn't come to bring people together. He came to draw a line in the sand. Pick up your mat and sin no more. It wasn't, let's all just be unified around whatever it is you feel on a particular day. No, it's a particular... I thought about that. Sir, you have to stand for something, right? And the liberals believe one thing, and conservatives believe another on a lot of issues. Not every issue, but a lot of issues. We obviously disagree. And that's fine. That's the way it is in our country. You know where there's a lot of unity? China. A lot of unity there. Well, because if you're not unified, you get thrown into a re-education camp. But thankfully, in the United States of America, we have wonderful and brave souls who've struggled, bled, and given their lives to the cause of freedom over the generations, who keep us free to have this disunity. Beware the call for unity. Beware the call for bipartisanship. Now, that might sound really inflammatory, and I'm sure all you liberals out there are tweeting, Ingraham after bin Laden killing calls for disunity. Why don't you do this thing called think for a moment before you tweet? Think before you tweet. I'll give you a tweet, not a trick. Here's a tweet. Sometimes disunity is good for us. I think a lot of the slave owners wanted unity, behind the idea that certain people were really property. Well, I think a lot of people who believed in segregation, they liked unity around their ideas. And a lot of people who believe that we can spend our way out of an economic disaster, they certainly would like unity. Because what did Obama say? Well, if I were president of China what did he say? The president of China, they get just...
It's a lot easier.
It's a lot easier for him. Yeah. They don't have to have these things called meaningful elections. They have to be held to account by the people. Unity. Do you see this as I see this? Republicans, beware. Conservatives, be alert. Independents, continue to think and analyze. Before you buy what you're hearing from the brilliant prognosticators and punditocracy and all of the smarty-pant politicians who are always telling us to sit down and listen to them. Think for a moment of how the election will look in the fall of 2012 if the Republican nominee is standing before the country agreeing with President Obama that we need to be unified. We need to work in a bipartisan fashion. Do you think that presidential candidate, that Republican, will have a snowball's chance in hell of being the president of the United States? I'll tell you who's not interested in getting along. And the groups that stick to their guns day in and day out, regardless of where the country is on any particular issue, it's the organized left. They're staying on their viewpoints on Afghanistan, immediate pullout. They're staying on point for Planned Parenthood, protecting them at all costs. They're staying on point for continuing to grow the welfare state. They're staying on point for continuing to see and enable a porous border that, especially now, we should seal up. They are staying on point. My question to you today, will the Republicans be cowed? Will the Republicans stand back or stand down? Will there be a post-Bin Laden capture mentality among Republicans? Will they refrain from criticizing? Because the president, for once, made the right call. The president should take note of the reaction to what happened when Bin Laden was killed. The more he does, focus on the American people and what's good for all the people, not just his constituency groups, not just special interest groups, but what's good for all of America. When he delivers results, eureka, we're all really happy. All the politicians should see that. If only the politicians could execute as flawlessly and as professionally day in and day out as our Navy SEALs, guess what? Your approval rating wouldn't be in the toilet today. People talked about the president's move, for making the right move to call in the SEALs instead of doing a predator drone strike on the compound. He was called gutsy for doing that. Brennan said it was gutsy, which I thought was an interesting way to refer to it. I think it was smart, definitely smart, and it was risky. I don't know if people describing Bush as gutsy. I think you probably would have heard a lot of liberals saying the true guts and courage comes from the men on the ground executing this flawlessly. It's a smart move, but gutsy is not the word. I mean, I'm not going to quibble over words, but I thought that was interesting. That got repeated by a lot of conservatives. A lot of my old pals starting to call Obama gutsy. And you know what I say to my friends? Boy, did you fall into that trap. They set that trap and a few people walked right in. This was gutsy. Do you think it was gutsy of President Obama, or did President Obama just do what he's supposed to do as commander-in-chief? Why do we have to call it gutsy? He did what he's paid to do. Finally! Yeah, and it was smart. No doubt about it. Much better to get that intelligence and send our elite team in and gather all that information up as they did than to blow the compound to smithereens. You don't get any of those thumb drives. Gutsy. Was it gutsy? I think that's kind of the counterspin, because people thought Obama's kind of wimpy, and now if you say he's gutsy, then that's going to swamp that. I don't know. I'm just saying it's interesting. Gutsy, courageous. I think the guys who were cheering that they got this assignment, those are the guys I'd call gutsy.